Okay, you guys, I'm so excited. As you have heard all of the amazing things about our speaker today, and she is coming to us, Dana Kaplan. I am so excited to have you here first and foremost.
Thank you so much for having me. I love when we can find communities that want to thrive together. And so thank you for creating one.
Oh, thank you. So I want to just jump into it today because you guys, even before we pressed record today, we have been talking and chatting, and we're like, oh, wait, we should actually record something here because it's so much gold and so great. What we're going back and forth with. And so I want to jump into it because we have a lot to cover today. And tell me a little bit. You're obviously an educational and emotional intelligence leader to families, to communities. And I want to know how that all came to be and where did that come from in your life?
So I've always been a trailblazer in everything that I've done. I've never fit into a box. And for many times in my life, I thought there was something quote unquote wrong with me because I was thinking so far ahead of the game, but like not able sometimes to put words to it or to put like the language around it. So when I'm from the Deep South, and I have recently been seeing the impact of keeping quiet about things that happen in your life. And so over the past couple of years, especially during the pandemic and especially around the reality that we have to be open and vulnerable and honest with people about our own journeys in order for them to know they're not alone. So I started telling people about my childhood, and I am from the Deep South. I'm from Columbus, Georgia, and I am Jewish and I am white. And so, you see the white privilege, but you don't know unless you ask me what happened. And I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism and racism and bigotry, and it was very hurtful. And I had no one to talk to about it. I didn't even know how to talk about it. And I felt like school needed to do more for me. And I felt like school needed to be a safer place for me. And I also, in the meantime, so here it is, I'm dealing with these emotional, like uncomfortable, like scenarios that I don't even know what to do about, right? So that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, I learned differently, but we didn't know that, right? I was never tested. There was nothing going on, but in a traditional setting, I am the teacher. I tell you what you have to do. I tell you how you learn, go for it. But that's not real. That's not reality. And so as an educator, I decided to become an educator because I wanted to change things. I wanted, not that it was broken, it's what we knew, but I wanted to come in and see what would happen if we did something different. Because everyone's trying to consistently come in and fix. There's nothing to fix. We don't even know what to fix. We don't even know what it is until we stop and look at it and ask questions. And we're not asking questions, so let me just come in. But what I did though is, because I was so curious about my own learning and so curious about my own emotional awareness, that I realized that it is the foundation for everything and everyone that I work with. So when I went into education in kindergarten, it's my heart and soul. And I taught kindergarten, pre-K, and then I've also taught all the way up to postgraduate students. Everything I do starts with emotional intelligence. It starts with, who am I? What do I think about myself? How do I feel about myself? What do I see in myself? Right? And there's so many components, essential ingredients to actually learning about who you are. And that self-awareness is what propels you in your learning, which propels you in your socialization. It propels you in all spaces and places. And schools were not doing that beforehand. And so when I went into my first year of teaching, it was all about building a community. It was building a space where everyone felt like they belonged. And I'm using words that are now catchphrases: belonging, accessing, included, right? And here it is, now we have an actual acronym for it. But at 23, I'm coming in saying, using these words and already knowing how important they were. And now, fast forward 20 years into teaching, and now we are still missing the mark, because now we have to have an actual acronym for it. We actually have to have programs for what's still not happening, and the programs aren't being followed. So for me to go into education, it was bigger than what I had ever imagined. And it was more about the child's development and the child thriving and removing labels and limits from children than anything. And what I discovered is that I went from being what I thought a lifelong classroom teacher to a retired classroom teacher and a lifelong educator in the world. Because ultimately, we have to create a space for kids to be able to feel like they can access material, access spaces, feel included, feel like there's an equity going on where they can use their voice and ask for what they need for that rich sense of belonging. Because we live in a very diverse world, but that's not going to do anything for us if we don't know how to get into the game. And so that's where I am today, and the passions and the purpose behind my work.
Wow. Now, your own family that you have, how has that, I'm just so curious, because I know in my own journey, as I have gone from, where I was in, science and studying whales, where I was then, and then where I went, and then I've been studying humans. Well, I studied them before, but really working with humanity and families, especially for the last 10, 15 years. And when in my own family, in our own home, it's just been this evolution of things. Like, I don't recognize the mother that I was to my 2-year-old as the mother that I am to my 16-year-old today, and it's just so funny to see that. Ironic, I guess, is a better word there. But how has all of this really shaped your experience? How has it shaped your family experience?
It has actually been, I love that question, so thank you. It's been really interesting. So my parents, so uh, what you see is an award-winning educator that made massive impact in Atlanta, Georgia, and then made massive impact in New York City. But that classroom teacher was only talking about feeling anxious at times, or having test anxiety, or talking about my learning. I wasn't actually talking about my emotional state that I was in as a child, right? I did talk about my learning as a child, but I didn't talk about how I actually felt about myself. And so since leaving the classroom, since really diving deep into the work that I know that I'm here for, it has been an interesting conversation around that, right? I mean, I did a podcast the other day, and my mom texted me and she goes, "Brilliant job. I just really hope you don't think we look at you as a misfit." And I'm like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's not about how you look at me, it's how I feel. And so we had this whole conversation about it afterwards. And I'm excited for her to hear this podcast as well, because, it's the more we can have conversations, whether or not they are easy, whether or not they are uncomfortable, whether or not they are vulnerable, whether or not they are cut and dry. It is so critical to ask questions and to be curious, because I know my mom does not want me to feel like I don't belong. But at the same time, that's not her job anymore. It's now my job to make sure I feel like I belong. How am I feeling in my body? Am I doing what drives my passion? Am I doing what I love? And because I didn't have those kinds of conversations with other people, with certain people in my life growing up, they're now hearing about it now. And the more we actually are open to having the conversations, to diving into the spaces that were scary for us, the richer our connections can be. The rich connection is my relationship with my parents has grown exponential. My siblings and it's exponential. Like they used to think that I was just this whimsical person coming up with all these ideas and floating around and taking kids on field trips and doing, rapid fire, all these like things. But I helped my older brother during COVID with his kids, and they saw me in action working, and they're like, "Oh my God, now we get it. You have a structure in place. You do the structure, we follow what you say, the world changes." And it's not that I have a magic wand. It's that we are so quick to bypass the emotional state. We're so quick to bypass the critical piece of our life to get to the end shining object, that the shiny object means nothing.
Right.
And so that is the impact. And I am grateful every day because I get to actually show up and be my authentic self. And I don't apologize for it anymore.
Mm. It's so powerful to not have to apologize for that or not feel like you are holding back anything that you're having there. And I also love, which is a great transition. You said it's not my mom's job anymore to help myself feel belonging, which means also at some point it was, right? It was our parents' job at some point to help us feel like we had a safe place to go. We had a place that we belonged. And then there's this transition, this childhood to adulthood phase. And when I'm working with families in the 65-70, those 6,570 days that your child is at home around, we don't kick them out on, the day after, but it is during that time that we are handing them over. And so what I find so critical is that there is that transfer of power, if you will, power over yourself. And if you don't teach them how to do it at home, then on, that next day when they're out of the house, they're going to be like, well, this is mom's job to make me feel belonging, and mom and dad aren't here. And so therefore I don't feel belonging. Therefore I am lost and everything. And I find that so interesting because a lot of people are a lot of families today. And I think we're kind of indoctrinated into this, like you are their everything until they leave. But then there's no teaching there. There's no teaching of how they can live independently on their own and be in charge of that emotional side of themselves. And I 100% agree that your emotional state, your emotional intellect of yourself and also those around you and what is happening around you is so much more important than the A on the test or the, I don't know, football trophy or whatever that is. And you'll get there in such a better way if you have these precursors here. So okay, so let's break into this a little bit. We were chatting a little bit about homeschooling before. As many of our listeners know, I homeschool 3 of my kids still. I homeschooled all 4 of them for 4 years, and then I've homeschooled 3 of them for the last 3 years, 2.5, I guess. And so with COVID happening and all of us, when COVID started going down, March 13th, 2020, the world shut down. And then my email box and my text and all my DMs were flooded because they knew that people knew that I homeschooled already. And they were like, what in the world do I do? Right. But it was so interesting to me because what I wanted to do was teach people how to teach their kids, but most of the questions I was getting were, what curriculum should I use? What computer do I need? Right. It was all the logistics. And that lasted not just a week or 2 weeks, that lasted for like a year after that. And so even a year in, people were still asking logistics, like, let me just check the box instead of, wait, how do I actually have success in doing this? So I would just love to know kind of your perspective and your thoughts on all of this with helping our kids with emotional intelligence in education, outside of homeschooling, and therefore take it away.
Thanks. So, I think it's really important that we talk about homeschooling. So just a little background on me. Speaking of March 13th, 2020, I launched Developing Empathetic Education with Dana. It stands for DEED because I believe we're always doing deeds in the world. And I launched it, and I was supposed to have my first in-person workshop that following Tuesday. So the world shuts down on the 13th, and my workshops were supposed to start on Tuesday. So, and to give you a little bit of background, when I was in the classroom, I believed that we learn in every facet of the world. So it's in parks, it's in museums, it's in in coliseums, it is in the big orchestra, playroom. Like it's everywhere. We learn everywhere.
Yes.
And if we keep kids in a box, then they will be too scared to get out of that box.
Yes.
So my whole philosophy on teaching is really and truly what the homeschooling premise is supposed to be. So let me just stop there. That is why I love the homeschooling philosophy, because it's about real world experiences, i.e., once my kids understood how to make base 10 in kindergarten, we would then start going to the grocery store and buying snacks, because I wanted them to start understanding, well, 10 is really a dime, 2 nickels is 10, 5 pennies and a 5, right? So you're working with real tangible experiences so kids can understand the real life benefit behind it, which is, again, what homeschooling is supposed to be. COVID hits, everything takes a turn. This whole vision that I have is now going to go online. I've taught online before through FaceTime when I'm in town or out of town or what have you. And so this is nothing new for me. Zoom was new for me, and leading workshops was new for me. Building relationships and connections is my gift. It is my gift. So this was not a strain on me. What was very interesting, though, was how quick the idea of, oh my God, I have to homeschool my kids now. And actually, it was almost a Freudian slip when I said parent, because the parents were also having to school themselves on, oh my God, what am I supposed to do now, right?
Yes.
So here it is. The world is trying to figure out this online system. We have so much uncertainty going on in the world. If we buy something else, another curriculum, another MacBook, another fill in the blank, at least I have the materials, right? Like, so I understand why everyone was asking you all the logistics behind it. What the core problem, though, was it's not about having more materials, and it's not about having the latest technology. It's about really understanding your child as a learner. And that has been the most critical conversation that I've had with every single person that I've ever supported, partnered with in the homeschooling industry. And similar to what we were talking about earlier, if you don't know your child as the whole being, and you only see your child as the academic or the emotional state, or like in just various compartments, and I'm not putting a label or a limit on it, I'm actually just stating, if I only know my child in the academic arena, and I know that they picked up reading really early and they understand numbers really early, that's amazing. But hold on a second, I'm going to keep nourishing that area that I know they're so unbelievably strong in, which means their deficits are serious deficits. Yes. Their emotional well-being, their social well-being, their ability to regulate, their awareness of their self, none of that is worked on. So now you have this robotic human coming in, thriving intellectually, and I'm going to use the word failure intentionally, because if you don't try, you fail. So you are failing because you're not even trying to do anything in the areas that need to be fed. So that is the problem that I see with the homeschooling scenario. They have to be emotionally fed. They have to be socially fed. They have to be intellectually fed. They have to be physically fed. Like they have to, and when I say physically fed, it's not just the food, it's they have to be running around and moving their body. It's a holistic approach to learning. And that is the piece that we have to remember, because homeschooling is not about another curriculum. It is about, hold on a second. My child is struggling holding a pencil. Am I paying attention to that? Am I paying attention to the fact that my child is struggling holding a pencil? Am I asking someone to help me? Am I seeking out supports for my child? Am I seeking out supports for myself so I can help my child? Or am I saying, here's a crayon, it's thicker, just use that. Here's a marker, use that instead. Or just go use a computer, or just go type, or just go talk into a recorder. You don't need to type out your essay. You don't need to write your essay. Where are we putting Band-Aids instead of supporting? Yeah. Where are we digging into the realities of what's really needed? Are we really scared to do the work in order to make sure our kids thrive? Or are we doing what's easier for us because now I'm validated, my kid's thriving, quote unquote. My kid's behaving, quote unquote. So my kid's thriving. and everyone is validated. But at the end of the day, there's no validation, because can your kid go outside and be independent?
Mm.
Can your child go introduce themselves to a new person on the playground, or even just go play with someone on the playground that they don't know? Can your child go in to a college interview and talk about their passions and purpose without you sitting next to them? Can your child actually go off to college and not make all A's because they are committed to doing the uncomfortable, which means going to a party or going to lunch with a friend or going to a club meeting that they've always been curious about but have never had the opportunity to explore? And that's when you know whether or not we're thriving.
Mm.
But until we're doing all of those different components for kids, we have to be really conscientious about it. And I also want to be very clear on this. This has to happen in real schools too. Real school meaning the four walls of a building where you go and take your kid to school. They have an educator, multiple educators. They're being assessed and aware of and all the things. It's not your child's getting an A, so the teacher's doing a great job. It's, okay, your child's getting an A. What else do I need to do for your child? Your child's already gotten an A. They've mastered this subject. Great. What else do I need to do to help and stretch and expand? And I will speak to this intentionally, because before we were talking and you were talking about your daughter, how she was going to a gifted and talented school that you guys had to pay for. I started one of the most coveted gifted and talented programs in New York City on my own, not having a curriculum, not knowing what I was jumping into. I even was certified in gifted and talented because I was curious about it. And that is the word I want to give to all of you guys. You have to be curious. You have to live curiously in order to discover, and in order to release the judgments on your expectations of what's supposed to happen, and get curious about what is happening. That's amazing that your daughter is reading at 4. Well, let's get curious about what else we need to do for her so she can holistically thrive at 4. Not just so you can go and tell your friends that she's reading at 4. Let's look at your 18-year-old and congratulate them and celebrate them that they got through that they're now going off to college, that they were willing to take rapid tests every single day so they can walk into a classroom. How are they emotionally feeling right now? Did you encourage them to take a mental health day and just go sit in the sun under a tree and read a book of their own choice instead of running off to join another committee for their resume? So we have to really look at everything instead of just making these prescribed scenarios for ourselves. And so that's really what it comes down to: the emotional intelligence, the self-awareness. It starts with the parent, and it starts with, how much am I overscheduling my kid? How much am I doing to make sure that I check off my own boxes as a parent? How much am I really stepping back and allowing my child to live their authentic journey for themselves? And these are questions parents are scared to ask.
Very, very. And I feel like too, it's part of the paradigm of parenting is that we were raised in a different era with different ideals of what parenting was than today. I mean, and this has been going on since parenting began, right? And so I think about, me, I grew up in the 80s, and it was very different then in the 80s. Huge, because it was pre-internet, right? And pre-social media. If you wanted someone, you had to call the home phone in order to have a conversation with your voice, right? And then it is just so much different today in helping them. So helping parents learn alongside their children as they're learning, that's what takes so much vulnerability too, right?
Yes.
And human connection is human connection, whether it is, through a text or through a phone call or face to face. And so no matter what your kid is going through, you have a story, you have something in your past that you can bring to light and just be like, I can understand this feeling that you're having, and really step into that, right? Not sympathy, but empathy. Really step into that with them and go through it with them. And it will help you more understand too. So
It's really important that you share that, because I think I use Halloween as the easiest frame of reference. I actually truly don't like Halloween. And it's not about the costumes, it's about the masks.
mm,
Masks and paint on the face, it just scares me. It's like, what's behind there? Why are you too scared to show me what's happening? And that is me being an empath. That is me feeling the world so deeply. And that's also me knowing my work and my passion and myself so richly. All that being said, it's easy for me to share this point referencing Halloween. We love Halloween. Why? Because we get to put on a costume and be someone else.
yeah.
Why? Because we get to hide and armor up in a whole new way, in a whole new suit. And we don't have to be the person that you see on the regular. The more that we can take off the costumes, the more we can disarm and let our emotions flow and show our kids that we feel emotion, anger, rage, joy, sadness, empathy, compassion, the more the children will too. So that when they get to the boardroom, they're not having to learn all of these skills that they needed to learn in the playroom.
Yes.
And that is the disconnect. The connection with your child is the most essential connection you can ever have. When we think about a baby in the womb, how is it thriving? Through the umbilical cord. It is the bridge. When the baby comes into the world, the bridge is cut, physically cut. It is now our emotional commitment, social commitment to keep that bridge intact. And one of my favorite invitations that parents ask me to help with are having the uncomfortable conversations. How do I get back to my child? How do I really understand what they're going through right now? And we don't get to use the pandemic as an excuse,
Yeah.
because the amount of people that went from, oh my God, this is so scary, I hate my life, to it's actually really nice not to be so overscheduled, to overscheduling again.
Yeah.
The amount of conversations that I've had to have from September of 2021 until December 31st of 2021 about stop overscheduling your kids.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're having breakdowns again? Why do you think you're discovering that they're drinking more in high school? Why do you think your daughter came home and told you that her best friend started smoking pot in 9th grade on a regular basis? We've got to really get back down to brass tacks. What are we doing to feed the anxiety? And it's overscheduling. It's not having the conversations. And it's the pressurizing that we're consistently going and going and going and going. And that is the one lesson the pandemic was intended to teach us. It was intended to teach us not to socially distance, not to social distance. It was taught to teach us to physically distance ourselves from other people and socially gather, socially come back together through Zoom, speaking of technology, through Zoom, through FaceTime, through texting, through any modality that you possibly can have, so you can build that rich connection. Because without the connection, why are we even here? What is our purpose? And that piece has to be remembered.
No, exactly. Exactly. And you touched on a couple of things in there, but before we close out today, I really want to dive in on the whole no labels thing, because I feel like this is so huge, and it weighs so much on my heart that every kid today, I feel like, feels that they have to have a label, which is so weird, because you're reading out there, don't label me, don't label me. By the way, I'm this label. What label are you? And it's like, what? What do you mean?
I love this conversation. I had this conversation with so many, and it's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So here's a funny story for you. So yes, I'm hyper. Yes, I'm late to a lot of things. Yes, my mind can drift off. Those are interesting if you want to look at it and start making a list, okay? So here it is. Why am I thriving as a kindergarten teacher? Because I'm with kindergartners that have a little bit less energy than me. So I am thriving. We are going on anywhere from 60 to 80 field trips a year. We're running around New York City. We're running around wherever we're going. I'm getting back to school at 2:39, school ends at 2:40. The kids are exhausted, but I'm okay. I'm still like running around because they're my quote unquote medicine.
Mm.
I did not find out, I was not actually diagnosed with ADHD until 3 weeks before I left the classroom in 2018 in June.
Mm.
Okay, so how comical is this? So I went to go and have a medicine check because I do have anxiety, and my therapist was like, and I was dealing with severe IBS, and she's like, I want you to go and just make sure everything is copacetic, and we're really taking care of we're checking in with all arenas, going back to self-awareness. Don't just put a Band-Aid on. Don't just slap it on with medicine and think you're okay. You've got to really stay on top of every aspect of your human self to make sure you're thriving. So I go in and I have this conversation with this psychiatrist, and he's like, tell me about your learning. And within 3 minutes, he's like, you are so classic ADHD. I'm like, seriously? Stick another Post-it on me. It's totally cool. I am not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this. I'm not. He's like, no, I'm being serious with you. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, I always tell people I have ADHD. He's like, I'm not kidding with you. And I was like, oh, well, whatever. It's my superpower. I can do so many things with it, right? So this whole time, I had never been on meds. I'd never done anything for ADHD. Now I do take medicine for ADHD, and it is monitored intentionally. ADHD, I have ADHD. ADHD does not have me.
Mm.
I know that it is my superpower because I have a gazillion markers. I have 15 colors of Post-its around me. My planner is so strategic. No one else would ever understand it.
Describing my desk right now.
No one would ever understand it. Why? Because I had to teach myself coping mechanisms. So what do I do now for kids? I teach them about their executive functioning button at the frontal cortex of their brain and how they can help themselves. So when we look at labels and limits, I need to have a diagnosis so I know how I need to learn. I need a diagnosis so I know I can thrive. You're not going to tell a diabetic not to go and find out that they have diabetes and just keep giving them sugar, right? You're not going to go and give a nonverbal autistic child, you're not going to go take them to the park and leave them on their own. Right? We have to have these diagnoses. We have to know what is going on. We are ignorant. Ignorant is not bliss. No. Denial is the worst medicine any of us can ever take. So when it comes down to labels and limits, you are limiting yourself, you are limiting your child by not finding out what they need. The label component is a miracle. The amount of kids that can now have speech services, the amount of kids that can now know why they're not able to hold a pencil because they need occupational therapy to build fine motor muscles in their hands. Why is my child still drooling at 9? Oh, they have low tone in their mouth. Maybe they need to go see somebody, a speech therapist, to help them build up the muscles in their face, right? These diagnoses are intentional. They are not to limit you. They are to empower you. They are to be your powerful source to know exactly what you personally need in order to thrive. The diagnosis is a seed. If you want to water it as a label, that's your responsibility to pay attention to why. As a parent, as an educator, it is an excuse. It is an excuse, and it is an excuse. I no longer I tell people thank you for waiting for me if I'm a few minutes late. I tell people thank you. I got lost. I was completely focused on a task. I'm not apologizing. I'm letting you know that if the time still doesn't work for you, I totally get it. Can we make another date? Yesterday, I had a phone date, like literally a phone date with a friend that we had to book 3 weeks ago. Okay. I'm talking to this man about diversity, equity, inclusion, because my passion in the world is to create an accessible space for all to feel included, accessible, and a rich sense of belonging. The world's diverse. It's always going to be diverse. That's what it is. I'm a trailblazer in what I'm doing. No one's doing it for children. They're only doing it for high schoolers, grad students, college, and into the workspace. Why are we starting there? It makes no sense. We need to be doing it younger. That is what I do. I'm so excited about this conversation I'm having with this man yesterday that I was literally, my girlfriend texted me twice. Are you coming on? Are we having our date? And I was like, okay, I really got to go. Because the conversation was so amazing yesterday, I looked at the guy and I was like, I'm on fire right now. Can I talk to you tomorrow? And so we talked this morning before our podcast. And I literally, he's like, okay, so he's an hour behind. So he's like, so I'll see you at 9:30. I was like, no, because that's 10:30 my time and I have to be on with her at 11. If we talked so much yesterday, I know we're going to talk so much more tomorrow, right? Be mindful. Be mindful of what your needs are. And that's where we diminish the labels and limits and celebrate ourselves as the powerhouses that we are meant to be.
Love it. Yeah. You're just adding to your toolbox, right? You know what project you're building then, and you can add to your toolbox accordingly after that.
Yeah. And if I may also offer this to parents, it's really important that you honor yourself and know that you have done nothing wrong. When a child comes out with a learning difference, it's not because you did something wrong. It's not because your DNA is screwed up. It's because it's life. It was meant to be. And there's a learning process through this. And you are all going to grow stronger together if you look at it as it happening for us, instead of to us. Get yourself out of the victim mode and get yourself into the powerhouse, thriving human that you are. Be the thought leader, be the creative leader, be the human that you want to be. Because the more you as parents do that, the more your children will freely do it. And that's the scariest part. You're as parents, I've watched so quickly, again, going back to the conversation about my mom, I could feel it in my heart as I felt her thinking that she had done something wrong. She did the best that she could. My parents did the absolute best that they could. They still do the absolute best that they can. My dad's like, do you need some money? I'm like, no, I'm good. Are you sure? It's like I'm in college, right? And yes, sometimes I talk really fast, like I was just a minute ago, because I get so excited and I'm so passionate about my work. And then I slow down and I really sit in what I'm saying. And I really hope that your listeners will sit in what I'm sharing right now. As parents, your job is to create a safe, healthy environment for your child to thrive. And if you personally are not taking care of yourself, if you personally are not taking a time out for yourself to go for a walk, to go outside and scream because you've got this rage inside, and you just need to get it out of your body, for you not to have a glass of wine with your friends, for you to completely disconnect from everyone else because you think your children are the only focal point in your life aside from your job, you're only hurting yourself. Because what happens on 6,751?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I could have this be a 4-hour podcast. I really could. And hopefully we'll get together and we will definitely talk again and teach together again. But I just want to thank you for being on here. I have taken copious notes and just for my own self and our own family. And I'm so glad that you are working in the children and family sector in all of these important topics. And it's an honor to be sitting with you today and be able to have this conversation. So thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us real quick where everyone can find you?
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank you because it's creating platforms like what you're doing for experts like myself to come on and really share how we can shift the paradigm. Instead of talking about the problem, we give actionable steps. And the more action we take, the better our world's going to be. So I really want to thank you for inviting me to come on. Now you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and I have my own website, danakaplanteach.com. I'm also on social media, on Instagram. You can find me there, and on Facebook. And yeah, I'm all over the world, actually.
Aren't we all today? Aren't we all today? I love it. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again for having us on. Listeners, or family architects that are listening. You are building the beginning of someone else's life. That is what we are doing as parents. And we are doing the best we can with what we have. And the more we know, the more we can put into action and be better for it. So thank you again for being on. Thank you, listeners, for listening. And I will check in and see you next week.